We have a question to discuss today. Let me read out the question. I often get this question from family and friends that if Bhagavad Gita is so great, why hasn't it helped the suffering and poverty of India? I don't know what to tell them. The question is, if Bhagavad Gita is great, why do we see the poverty in India? What should be our response? I would typically first try to gauge what is the intent behind the question, whether it is confrontational in nature or whether it is out of inquisitiveness. So today I'll try to balance between both of these as I put forth my views based on this question. So, talking about poverty, Amma says there are two forms of poverty the world sees. One, the poverty because of lack of the basic necessities like food, clothing, and shelter. And the second form of poverty, which is more important, it is because of lack of love and compassion. And Amma says if we handle the second form of poverty, automatically the first form of poverty is also taken care of. And in parallel to this, Amma talks about two forms of knowledge or two forms of education. The knowledge or education for living, knowledge and education for life. The knowledge or education for living is something we acquire from school, from college, from any formal form of educational institution. The second one is the knowledge for life, which isn't acquired specifically from a defined syllabus. Rather, it is acquired based out of examples and experiences that we have and people around us have, right from our parents, neighbors, elders, teachers, friends. It is the knowledge or it is the value that is inculcated within us right from when we are young and as we grow up with it. We could term it as tradition, we could term it as culture. It is something that builds our character, basically. And Amma says this form of knowledge automatically addresses the second form of poverty, the poverty of love and compassion, and also takes care of the first form of poverty. So, Bhagavad Gita is a text that imparts the second form of knowledge. It's not about making us materialistically rich. Rather, it teaches us, irrespective of whether you have money or not, irrespective of whether you're rich or poor, how could you be content and happy? It teaches us to balance between acceptance and expectation. How well are we able to curb our expectations and how well are we able to exercise our ability to accept? A successful life is defined not based on all that we acquire, rather based on how well are we able to balance between how much I crave for, expect, and two, how well am I able to balance it with my attitude of accepting. If you go by that metric, from my experience being born and brought up in India, I feel even the poor people in India, the so-called materialistically poor people in India, seem to have, intrinsically have that balance between acceptance and expectation. You could see even the poorest of the poor being quite satisfied. He may be homeless, he may be begging, by roadside, but as a family, they just seem to be quite much more content than someone who is much more richer than them materialistically. So it is about the richness within rather than the materialistic richness that we are talking about. And that's what Bhagavad Gita focuses on. That's what it teaches us. Talking about this reminds me of an experience I had a few years ago. I feel it was the first time I was going back to India after coming to the US. So I was in the US for 4 years and I was going back to India to renew my student visa. So I was flying from Washington, D.C. to Mumbai, where I had my visa interview at the US consulate there. So during my travel from Washington, D.C. to Mumbai, I had a couple of experiences which I thought very well addresses this very topic. So as I go to the airport here in Washington, D.C., I am checking in. So my bag is weighed, taken in, and I was then asked to present some support documents because I was going back for renewing my visa. And I was not aware that I need to show my documents right at the check-in counter. But for whatever reason, for whatever valid reason, I was asked for those documents. I told them I didn't realize I had to show it to you. My documents are in my bag. And by the time I mentioned that, the personnel there had already placed the bag on the conveyor belt, wherein it is carried to however the bag would be loaded onto the airplane. And it was right there. So I told her, could you just fetch that bag and I can give you the document? And the person told me, sorry, I cannot do that. It is already on the conveyor belt. I said, it's right there. You just have to take a step back and just grab the bag. And she said, sorry, I cannot do that. That's not per our policy. I was like, if you don't give me that bag, I won't be able to give you the document. And if I don't give you the document, you cannot check me in. And if I cannot check in, you will have to anyway retrieve the bag and give it back to me. So why not do it now? Then she realized, oh, there's a problem. I should rather get the bag to make it easier for me. But by the time she had made up her mind, the bag was already gone into that small opening or the tunnel into which it goes. Anyway, I had a copy of the document so I could satisfy the requirements and check in. And then I flew to Mumbai. So this was the first experience. The second experience was in Mumbai. I landed at the VRs like at 2:30 a.m. or some such. And then I get a cab to go to the place where I was supposed to freshen up, change, and then go to the US consulate later in the day. So I get into the cab and then we go to this place where I was supposed to stay and change, freshen up, etc. So we get to that locality, but we are not able to locate the actual building. And it's very common in India, just roll your window down, ask any stranger, and they'll definitely try to help you. So I rolled my window down. It was very early in the morning, not too many people around. There was this young boy, maybe about 12 or 13, who was on his bicycle with a bunch of newspapers on the back. Probably he was one of those newspaper distribution boys. So I asked him, do you know this address? And he very confidently said, I know this address. Go take left, right, whatever the direction was. And he says it's a long way. So go to this place, go to this particular intersection. This is the direction. Go to that intersection and ask anyone. They'll tell you how to get there. I said, very well, thanks a lot. And we move forward and we try to get to that intersection. Once we are at that intersection, there's no one around. So I roll my window down to see if I can find someone. And who do I find outside the window? This very same boy. And I was like, wow, didn't I see you back there? Anyway, can you tell me what the further directions are? And he says, now you go left, right, whatever, straight, and you will reach this small temple by the side of the road. And at that point, anyone can point you to the building. I thought, thank you. Told him thank you, and then we tried to go to the point that he directed us to, and we reached the temple, and I again rolled the window down Lo and behold, who is outside? This very little boy. I was quite surprised to see him again, and he was gasping for breath, sweating profusely, very tired, very famished. I was like, what happened? Why are you, pedaling the bicycle behind us? He said, oh, I realized at this time you won't find anyone on the road. So I thought I will just pedal or go with you and try to get you to the destination. He ended up coming all the way till the gate of the building. And I felt very bad for someone like this who was super tired. Probably he had his own job to do to distribute the newspapers. In spite of that, he came all the way till the gate and keeping up with the pace of a car on a bicycle. Definitely not an easy thing for a 12-year-old boy. So I thought I should just give him something in return, try to hand him some money. And he just instantaneously told me, Mauj karo, enjoy life. And he didn't accept the money, he just left. So the thought that struck me then is this very topic that we are discussing. Should I consider the boy poor or should I consider him rich? Materialistically, definitely he was not rich. He didn't seem like he was rich. He would have very well been benefited by the money that I handed him, but he didn't want it. So I had two experiences during my travel from Washington DC to India that I shared. The first experience where the person told me, I am not paid for this, so I will not do this. I'll do only for as much I am paid for, and I'll not do anything more. And here, there is this little boy who doesn't care about what he gets, doesn't care about the money that was handed to him. And he, in spite of that, went out of the way, literally putting his 100% into it to help some stranger in a cab to get to the building that he was searching for. So again, the question we need to ask is this boy rich or poor? So when we talk about poverty in India, this is the very point I was trying to make. Is this boy rich or poor? I feel this boy is very rich, and that's what Bhagavad Gita teaches us. To be rich from within, irrespective of what we have, what we don't have. Can I be happy? Can I be content? Can I be joyful? Can I enjoy every moment in my life, or as many moments in my life? If you remember, we were discussing the 557th name of Lalita Sahasranama during our Lalita Sahasranama weekly scriptural discussion. The name is Nikhileshwari. Om Nikhileshwaryai Namah. The Divine Mother, who is the goddess of everything, who is the queen of everything. When is someone the goddess of everything? When you have everything under your control. Not that the things and the people around you dictate terms to you. And while discussing that name, we were discussing about how a millionaire who is craving to become a billionaire is much poorer than someone who just has $1,000 and is very, very well content with that. So someone is not rich by what he has. He's rather poor based on what he wants. And someone else is much richer if his wants are much smaller. So again, when we think of this question about poverty, we need to deeply think about what exactly is poverty. And it is this very richness that India has, that even today there are millions who go to India, who seek to go to India, to seek that happiness, to understand about this very tradition, Sanatana Dharma, that teaches us to be happy irrespective of whatever we have or what we don't have. So that is the first form of poverty or richness. not poverty, I would say richness that we were talking about, the internal richness. And the second form of richness, the materialistic richness. Even in terms of materialistic richness, India was, or India has been, never quite backward, as a matter of fact. India was actually in the forefront, and India being exposed to this very tradition that Bhagavad Gita belongs to, India was in forefront in terms of materialistic richness, in terms of materialistic abundance. I remember a prolific speaker from India who happened to be the former Under Secretary General at the United Nations, who was speaking at the Oxford Union Society in United Kingdom. He was participating in a debate about the British rule over the colonies across the world, and he was representing India, and he was talking about how the British looted India of its materialistic prosperity. Let's not get to that debate, that's altogether a different thing. But the point he made was that before the British came to India, India's contribution towards the global GDP was at about 23%. That is almost the quarter of the whole global GDP, just by one country or one subcontinent. And when the British left India, India's contribution was less than 4%. That's how much India was, or India's prosperity was, the materialistic prosperity was taken away from it. And before the British came, for several hundred more years, India was ruled by the Persian kings. So my point was, even in terms of materialistic prosperity, richness, India was, or India has been in the forefront. In spite of all this, India today is still one of the fastest growing major economy in the world. So Bhagavad Gita is also imparting that culture, that knowledge, which makes us rich from within and also rich from outside. This very place that I am sitting in, Washington, D.C., the capital of United States of America, the Native Americans got their name as Indians because someone who was after the richness of India was in search of India and by mistake reached the shores of North America. And he thought he reached India, and the name thus fell upon the Native Americans back then. So that, even that shows, that talks, the very fact that the Native Americans are called Indians speaks about the fact of the richness, the materialistic richness that India stood for. Both materialistic richness and the much more meaningful internal richness. So going by these points, I am very well convinced India is completely or utterly rich in both the sense. And that's what the tradition that Bhagavad Gita belongs to has given to the people and the subcontinent there. I hope that answers your question, and hope we are able to explain this to others when they ask us this very question. Om Amriteshwariyai Namah.